This is AM 650's The Law Show with Sterling Fox. Now back to the show.
Talking personal injury law with Joe Murphy and Steve Gibson from Murphy Batista LLP, Vancouver personal injury lawyers with offices downtown on West Georgia and online at murphybatista.com. And by the way, Batista is Batista, in case you're trying to find that and it's just not working out for you. 2 T's and you're home free. We talked a little bit about the process by which a person goes through in order to become, to go to Murphy Batista, Steve and Joe. We talked about the fact that it's likely to take about a 90-minute initial interview. It would be helpful if that person brought along maybe a family member or two, and certainly a lot of basic documents to support just the circumstances of the case. How long does it take, Joe, for the firm to decide whether or not a case has merit and is the kind of, because the case may have merit, but Murphy Batista may still not want to take it on. So what is it that causes you to determine, yeah, we'll take this. This is our kind of case?
Well, Sterling, firstly, it's a function of whether we want to act for this person. And over time, the lawyer develops a skill at assessing whether this is a client we want. There are some people who I assess simply to be impossible to satisfy. And if that's the case, and I understand that in the first meeting, I'll think, we're not going to be able to help you. You're not going to be happy at the end of it.
Right.
And we're not happy at the end of it, so this isn't a good choice. There are people who simply present as not being credible in maybe what they say or how they say it.
Right.
We don't want those clients. If we have a client that needs our help and has a legitimate claim, even if the accident appears to be really difficult, then we'll probably take it on. But sometimes after that first meeting, we go through and we do the investigation. We hire oftentimes engineers. We do the workup. Because we want to know that there's a reasonable prospect of success before we say to the client, okay, let's proceed.
Right.
There are some cases that no one can win because of the circumstances, and those are cases where we say to the client, we can't help you.
And Steve, are those cases where, as Joe just said, it's a no one can win this case? Is it because of that statute of limitations that we talked about earlier? It's expired. This is essentially it's a dead legal case that we can't. There's no reviving this case.
Yeah, well, that's one aspect. I mean, there are sometimes we've had people come into us 6 years after an accident, saying that they're still having problems and they never bothered filing a lawsuit.
Okay.
And I mean, if you're 4 years out, very, very difficult. There is some maneuvering to possibly extend it to 3 years, but I would never advise anyone to rely on that.
Sure. Okay.
It's a real dogfight to actually succeed in that, but it's possible. I'd say when we're talking about the cases that just don't have a good prospect of success,
yes,
it's usually on the issue of liability. So you in order to succeed, you have to be able to at least partially attribute fault to the party that you want to sue. If you're found to be 100% responsible for the event that caused your injuries,
then there's nobody else to sue.
You could be a quadriplegic. I hate to say it, but in those circumstances, if you're 100% responsible, it's very, very difficult to sue. I mean, maybe you could go after some Part 7 benefits, or there might be disability claims aside from ICBC, but they're very, very difficult cases.
Joe, Murphy Batista has an excellent reputation in this community, and particularly as litigators. Your firm goes to court a lot, and ICBC knows it. So when I go to Murphy Batista, because I'm upset at the way my case has been handled by ICBC, the first thing I'm going to do after having you hear me out and decide that, sure, I'll take your case, you're probably going to advise against this, but I'm going to want to go home and call my adjuster and say, I just hired Murphy Batista, and you are in some kind of trouble.
Well, Sterling, there's a lot of...
You would advise against that now?
Yeah, we say, let us deal with the adjuster. You just work at getting better. There are firms in this business who act for people injured in accidents who rarely go to court, and there's some of them who never go to court.
Right.
And insurance companies, big insurance companies like ICBC knows that. We go to trial on about 1 in 10 of our cases, and that's a very, very high percentage. And the advantage that creates for the other 90% of the files is we, I believe, get the maximum amount in settlement. So if an insurance company has a claim that's worth $100,000 and they have a law firm that never goes to court, are they really going to offer more than $70,000 to settle it, knowing the lawyer will not go to trial?
Well, why would they?
Whereas if they know the firm is ready, willing, and able to go to trial, they're going to put $90,000 or $95,000 or $100,000 on the table.
Sure.
So our clients don't want to go to trial. Nobody does. In fact, if I have a client in the first meeting that says, I really want to go to trial in this case, I usually won't take the file.
Okay.
Because that's not what normal people would do or say.
They just want their lives back.
They just want their lives back, and
Right.
they don't want to go to court and that. But the advantage of us going to court in the few cases that we have, the 1 in 10, is that the other 9 in 10 clients benefit from that.
One thing just to add to that is if you're a client and you feel that the lawyer that you're with, there's just something not quite right about what they're saying or what they're recommending for a settlement, you don't have to be afraid of getting a second opinion.
Right.
You can always go to another lawyer and run the facts by that lawyer. They may not have the entire file that the previous lawyer has, but a lawyer should get a good sense of whether the right things are being done. And if they're not, it's not a difficult process to switch lawyers. I mean, we don't want to run around, stealing files from each other. That's not what we're about.
But
we
sometimes-
often get referrals
Right.
from people where the representation that they're getting is inadequate,
Right.
and more things need to be done to justify what the case is worth.
Steve Gibson, if you do go to trial, will that case be heard by a judge or a jury?
So either ICBC or ourselves have the right to choose a jury.
Oh, okay.
And that process is made very early on in the case. You file a jury notice. The actual decision to use the jury is made only 45 days in advance of your trial, where you actually pay the fees required to assemble the jury. We basically decide, from our perspective, whether we want a jury on, whether the accident is severe in nature, is it a compelling story, would lay people be more understanding? Sometimes judges, they live different lives than very average, blue-collar people. And
Sure.
so it really depends on what kind of decision maker that you want. But either or, we've done many of both. And
Well, suppose now you think that for this particular case and the way that we can really best present it in court, Joe, is to a jury. This is something that's going to play to an audience well. The defendant, ICBC, says, no, we're not going to give you a chance to play to the gallery. You get a judge, and that's that. So who wins that battle?
Well, I filed the jury notice early on, which means we get a jury, and then ICBC applies before a judge shortly before the trial to say this case isn't suitable for a jury. And that judge will decide, yes, the case is suitable, the jury trial goes ahead, or no, it's not suitable, and the expression uses the judge strikes the jury.
Okay.
So both sides have the same rights. That is to say we want a jury or to say we don't want a jury. And if there's a big dispute at the end, a judge sorts it out before the trial.
complexity is usually the main factor for deciding whether a judge or a jury is appropriate or not.
Well, even just in terms of the type of evidence, Steve, that's going to be
Precisely.
presented, and maybe the amount of time that the trial could run.
Yes, yeah. Well, there's some criminal trials that go on for, a year,
That's true.
where there are juries. But the complexity of the medical information or the financial information that's involved, that does become a determining factor.
Myth or reality, Joe, juries are typically more generous with awards of damages than a solo judge would be.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Really case by case then, huh?
It's case by case. Many people think that a jury from the interior would be different than a jury from Vancouver, that this is just a different group of people, different perspective. I know in the United States, where they do a lot of studies of juries, it used to be thought that a Detroit jury would be the most generous. So the reality is the jury in our cases is 8 people picked off the voters list. Every jury is a different mix. You get people from different walks of life, different ages. They have to be more than 19 and less than 65.
Right.
You get an occupation and you get their address, and you then have to decide, yes, I want this person, or no, I don't. But I don't think you can say they're more or less generous all the time. The other reality is we have about 100 judges who sit in trial and make awards, and it goes without saying that among those judges, the awards are going to vary. Some judges are more generous than others.
Yep.
So there's all these variables that are at work in a case.
Steve?
I have a trial this coming spring in the outskirts of Toronto, and it's going to be in a jurisdiction that is right in the middle of Ford Nation.
Oh, boy.
And so I and my colleague in Toronto, we're trying to figure out how to present the case so that it can be compelling to that group of people. So we're dealing with an urban professional, someone who has a dental background, who's a dentist. So you really have to be very creative in convincing different types of people.
And if that's coming up in the spring, and here we are in mid-January, you don't know yet whether you're going to get a jury or not, do you?
Well, in Ontario, apparently in this jurisdiction, it has already been determined. Every province is different
I see.
On the jury
So in this case,
process.
you know there's going to be a jury.
There will be a jury.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah.
It's all of these nuances, the way the law works. It's wonderful to have the Law Show on the radio on Sunday mornings, because most of us pretend we know an awful lot more about the law than we actually do. When we have an opportunity to have people like Joe Murphy and Steve Gibson from Murphy Batista come by and visit us on the Law Show, we are indeed a lucky radio station. And there's another segment still ahead, so stay with us, and we'll be right back. And by the way, if you want to check them out, it's murphybatista.com online. Back after this.
This is AM 650's The Law Show. There's more of the show still ahead.